The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Pigg, and I am your host for today's webinar, Building Global Competence in Teachers. Please note that your microphones have been muted. However, we do encourage you to ask questions as they come to you. Please send your questions through the questions box that appears in your GoToWebinar panel. To do this, simply click on the text box, type your question, and click Send on the Send button. Later this evening, you will receive an email asking you to complete a brief evaluation about this webinar, and I thank you in advance for providing us with feedback. For those of you attending this webinar live, information about creating a certificate of attendance will also be forwarded to you later this evening. We will send you another email in the next business day or two with instructions on accessing the recording of this webinar and its presentation files. Now, before I introduce our presenters tonight, I would like to open us with a prayer. Father, as we learn about global and cultural competence, we pray that your Holy Spirit will be with us to open our minds and hearts to students from around this world. We know that you have made every skin color and you are praised by every language. We ask that we may follow your Son Jesus in loving every person, no matter where they come from. May we be able to create safe and welcoming environments for international students as they share their cultures with us and as we share our cultures with them. As we welcome the world into our classrooms through students, may we be a light to it and to them as well. We ask this in the name of Christ Jesus. Amen. Now, I would like to introduce today's presenters. Our first panelist is Mr. Jim White, Principal of Marquette Catholic High School in Michigan City, Indiana. And our second panelist is Mr. Nicholas Wilson, Director of Educational Services at 3W International. 3W International is North America's foremost international student management company, working with private schools to provide the tools and knowledge to start up and implement successful international students program. At this time, I will turn the webinar over to Nicholas and Jim.
Good evening, folks. Thank you for participating today, and for those who will listen in when it's posted on NCEA's Educational Resources tab. This topic is true and dear to my heart. I absolutely loved and embraced my international students when they were in my classroom, but I do know not all faculty have had the experiences that I have had, and that's not to their fault. So with that being said, this is at no means a finger-pointing session. This is no teachers are not comfortable with other cultures, so they're doing it wrong. You know, all the negatives. This is how do we, as a team now, if you do have international students on your campus, how do you move forward? And how do you assist your teachers that may have never traveled before? Maybe some of them don't even have passports, but now here's an opportunity to actually reflect and consider really strengthening your team to ultimately help your students. And so here's my agenda.
Excuse me, we actually cannot see your screen right now. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry.
I just popped it up. Sorry about that. Thank you. So here's my agenda. As you can see, I have Marquette Catholic's logo in the center because ultimately I'd like for you to hear Mr. White's presentation or his part of it today because having worked with his team the past couple of years, I really had the opportunity to see a program from the infancy stage to now where it is today. And it took a lot of forward thinking to make it come to fruition. And I think it has to do with the buy-in that the team was able to garden by the faculty and staff on Marquette. So I'd like to begin with why. Why am I advocating today for teachers to become culturally competent? But specifically, I would like for you to consider culturally comfortable. That competency gets kind of ambiguous at times, and I'd like for you to consider that it's how do we get people comfortable just working with other folks from other countries. The who and then I want to get into the what, the how, and what you can do now and today. And so I will pull the audience in a second to observe how many teachers, administrators, and folks that work in maybe in the diocesan office of who's looking to maybe move forward with an international student program or who has one. And so I'd like to start with why. Why should we consider helping our teachers to become a little bit more competent with cultures? And first is enrollment. And what you have observed in the past maybe even 5 years is a great influx of foreign cultures coming into the United States to study. And the data is unbelievable if you look at it in regards to different countries. But China makes up approximately 32% of the students that have left over here last year to study. And then you have 12% of those were Korean. So approximately 44% of the international students coming to study in secondary and university levels are coming from the eastern side of our globe. And that is an opportunity for private high schools to now enhance their enrollment. As domestic enrollment has declined, school leaders are now looking for an alternative route, and international students help in that. Coupled with enrollment, now you have diversity. I share the story with a young principal I met who left the oil and gas industry in Texas, and now he's a school principal in a little town in Texas. And I met with him ironically at the NCEA breakfast, and he shared with me, Nicholas, your program would be great because 99% of my student body come from a German descent, so predominantly all Caucasian. And he has one African American student in campus, and he feels sorry for that student, but knows that he's failing his whole entire student body because the students have only lived and known their culture in that community. And so he was looking into how to diversify his student body. And now mission, every school will talk about to educate the mind, the body, the soul of a child, and how to enhance their experience within school grounds. International students have that ability, and teachers that are competent within cultures have that the strength and the wherewithal to bring it all together. And then lastly, the new tag word within the educational field is, what are the skills needed for 21st century learners? And that has to do with critical thinking and problem solving. The ability to communicate and collaborate with a multicultural setting. And so most CEOs that are polled or leaders of corporations that will tell you is they don't need students that can just be rote learners or just memorize material. They want employees to come into their office or their setting and to sit down and put ideas together and to create some action items. And then lastly, tied in with those skills is citizenship, but citizenship with a global vision. And it's because of world hunger. It's because of global warming. These are aspects that our future citizens, like our students, will be up against. And it's no longer being a master of science or English or history. You need the skills to go ahead and sit down and collaborate with other cultures to really put a plan in place on how to help our students succeed and our world maintain its health. And so lastly, why am I advocating for teachers to be competent within multicultural setting is because it's for the students. If you have elected to recruit foreign students, it behooves that team to really sit down and reflect on their own biases and put a plan in place to help our students that are in their classroom. And so developing a cultural awareness entails understanding how racial, ethnic, and linguistic differences affect teachers' ways of thinking and students' experience at school. So with a greater cultural understanding, school staff can change aspects of the school culture to be more responsive to the students. And that's ultimately what I'm asking for you to consider. To be more responsive to the students, you'll see success with not only your international students, but your American students as well. I wanted to further elaborate on why I'm advocating for global competence, and that has to do with the nature of our schools. When you ultimately make the decision to bring a student from another culture into your classroom, the way we teach, the way we were taught to teach, the way we experience school as when we were adolescents is very different from what our students in other countries experience now and what they've experienced in the past. And so our methods of teaching are so abstract that them just sitting in your room is a whole different ballgame. And so it takes a teacher to kind of recognize that and then say, how can I kind of tailor my material to fit the needs of this child? And one idea in particular is that it's not the learning situation that the child should realize that the real objective of learning activity is not the particular task, but it's the child's own thinking. And so if you think about that, most Chinese students will come here and they want to know what's on the test, what do I have to know, and what do I need to basically memorize to take that assessment. Most Americans, when I taught, it wasn't specifically the content that I was targeting, but it was the aspect of how did the child really go through that activity and then actually develop their own thinking to create or problem solve. Most Asian students are not in that realm or that process, and their parents are also in that boat, and they can become a bit perplexed on how we in America teach. And now you have culture. So you have, if you would think about this, you have the students' culture, and then they come into your classroom, so they have the teacher's culture, and then they have the American culture, and then the whole entire community that you live in all intertwine within that student's life. And so there's a lot of pieces to juggle, not only as the teacher, but also the student. If the teacher or the adult is competent in their ability, they now have the strength and the ability to help put those little pieces together and help that child actually feel a little bit more welcomed in their classroom. And then I think the really true success to international students is helping them find friends or building that friendship. And we talk about it often. Students will sit in the classroom or they'll sit in the lunchroom, but you know, as adolescents, it's a bit difficult that if you're not from that school, you're not going to just make friends in a snap of a finger. So it takes some significant time to really mend that relationship. Teachers that recognize that will put students in the proper place and provide them opportunity to build and foster a friendship. And then I'd like to address race, because when you are put in a situation to where you are the minority, color, that notion of color shock is enough to really trump your thoughts. And so as our students are coming into a environment that may be 50% Caucasian and 50% African American, or a third of those two races, and then Latin America, that environment alone puts a lot of pressure on our international students. Because if we're speaking of the Eastern culture here, Asian students predominantly, I think that the data was that 95% of them come from the Han ethnicity. So they literally have never, if they come from a remote part of China, they may have never saw a person of color before besides their own demographics. So as teachers, we have to be aware of that and then put our best foot forward to help our students feel welcomed. And so the problem, so I will introduce three questions here, and then Thomas is going to run a poll for me, because I'd like to poll the audience. So my first question will be, one, I'm just looking to see how many educators or teachers or administrators that I have on staff or on this webinar now. And number two, do you currently have an international student program? And then my third question will be, have you ever received, at the school that you currently work at, have you ever received professional development that addresses culturally responsive teaching techniques? And so Thomas, if you would, can you poll our audience, please?
Yes, you should see a poll on your screen now. Okay, it looks like we have about half of the people responding here. Of the half of the people that we have responding, 33% say that they are school administrators, and then 67% say they are other.
Thank you, sir.
And now the second poll should be on your screen as well. All right, it looks like we have a little over 50% in now, 67. Okay, here we go. 75% say yes, they do have a international students program, and 25% say no, they do not. And the third and final question should appear on your screen now. All right, looks like we have most people voting here. 67% say yes, they have received training, and 33% say no, they have not.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Thomas. And that's actually, I know our sample size is a bit small here, but for the most part, you will find out that it's, I guess this is good. If we got 75% that do have a student program, 67 are saying they've had professional development. And that's kudos to the leadership. And I would probably argue the teachers who have maybe drummed up some thought and asked for some help. So the 30% that has not had professional development in regards to culturally responsive teaching, hopefully today, my last slide will advocate a few things that you can do and reach out to. And you're welcome to email me, and then look forward to some opportunities for yourself and for your fellow faculty. So moving forward, you're now looking at 3 images, and I'm going to have you think. This isn't a poll test. It's just literally for you to stop and think for a second. And I'm going to target the Eastern culture here, because I would argue most that are online, or most that will listen to this, will have students from the Eastern Hemisphere of from the world. And so this data came from Richard Nisbet from the University of Michigan. And what he provided, or what he wanted to see, is there a cultural responsive answer or specific target that most folks would argue? And what he drummed up was, we have a panda, a monkey, and bananas. And so if you sit down and think, out of the 2, which 2 images do you think belong together? There's no right or wrong answer. So out of the 3, which 2 do you think belong together? So now I gave you 10 seconds to think. And the idea here is most folks, including myself, those that live in the West or the Western Hemisphere, and that would be the UK, the US, and Canada, and etc., we would put the panda and the monkey in the category because we look at things in nouns and we analyze it, and instantly once I looked at it, I was like, well, a panda and a monkey are animals, so they're an animal kingdom, they go together. And so we put things in categories. Folks in the East tend to look at life in regards to relationships. How does one thing affect or belong with another item? And so if you're looking at the monkey eats the banana, so the monkey and the bananas belong together. Folks in the Eastern Hemisphere look in things in verbs, or the act of doing, or the act of belonging together. So the important piece here is if a teacher was to read or to assess a student's, let it be a piece of writing, and let it be in a second language of English, and they may see a lot of verbs or some errors that may be linked to it, it may not be the language piece, it's probably a part of the culture that's affecting the way they're thinking. And so it's just something to be aware of when you work with students from other cultures. And now I have another activity I'd like for you to consider. So I am a product of New York State education. I grew up and I taught in New York, and then I moved to Florida to seek more sunshine in my life. But that aside, I remember this image when I was in my student teaching program, and I felt as a novice instructor that it was kind of silly. I just wondered, why are we doing this? Isn't content more important? Should I be preparing to teach biology, not understanding cultures? But it wasn't until I really got my hands dirty in my time into being a teacher that I found that teaching is not just teaching, but it's also understanding your students and what they bring to the table. So having read, and now in my current role, a lot of research that's based on cultural education, I'd like for you to consider some terms. What are some terms that come to your mind for somebody that is competent within culture? So I'd give you another 10 seconds. And so what I did is, having read many discussions, I condensed some of the bulk here. And I'm sure you probably mentioned or thought a few of these, and maybe some of them else stand out. But what I really like to address here is the notion of equity. In my current capacity, working with schools across our country, I constantly meet with teachers, and then the teacher says to me, this isn't fair. Why should I reduce the amount of questions I ask a child? Why should I allow my international student to do X, Y, Z? You can name it, I've heard it. And specifically, it's some of our theology teachers. They should know the reasons why the church baptizes. And if you're working with a culture or students from China, you know predominantly many of them are atheist, and it's not atheist by choice, it's atheist by the lack of understanding because their government kind of keeps it a bit sheltered. So the notion of equity is providing a child knowing that they don't have the resources underneath them, they may not have the background knowledge, so you do have to give them an opportunity to really see success. And it's not the notion of being fair, it's the notion of helping them. And I'd like to then go to the bottom left there. Every article, and I would argue many of you, thought about empathy. And it's being empathetic for the individual that you are blessed with in your classroom to now have that opportunity to meet with this foreign student, and now you have the experience to share your knowledge about your home, your culture, your American way of life, and your content that you're teaching. And being empathetic is just bringing yourself down to that child and just really respecting the fact that they're doing this, and now you have that opportunity to help them. And so now the what. So now I literally would like to get into the why it's important and what does it look like. So that first one, that first term, the data says that teachers that believe in themselves, that are confident in their skills, are more willing to motivate, they're more willing to praise, they're more willing to ask probing questions to guide their students' learning process. This is material that when teachers that are competent within different cultures, they exhibit a different type of respect, if you would, and helping our students connect. And then that next idea here, the perspective consciousness, and that term is kind of coined, or it's explained as the ability to recognize one's views, beliefs, and experiences about the world are not universally shared. And I know it sounds simple, that what you see here in the United States is not what is going to occur into other countries. But until you really remove yourself out of your community, your school, and then you go to another, it is that aha moment. Teachers that are competent, culturally competent, do that often. And they've had that experience where your values and ideas here in the United States are just going to be very different from other cultures. And as I said earlier, empathy is that important one, and most of us that are comfortable working with our international students do show or exhibit a lot of empathy for our students. It also leads into the notion of perspective taking, which essentially means that you, as the instructor or the person, get into the head and the heart of that individual. And so as you reflect on your international students coming to your school, you put yourself in their shoes and you really think and try to say, how does this work and what's this look like? Culturally competent staff retool, so they don't sit back and just think that this is what I've done for the last few years. This is what that's what I'm going to continue to do. Times are changing, technology is changing, and cultures are changing. And so culturally competent staff sit back and they reflect on what they did last year, and now how can they tweak what they are up against for the next student body. Culturally competent staff are very sensitive to learners that are embarking and understanding a second language. And that's the piece that I was very empathetic with my students. I struggle with studying a second language, and I can't imagine coming or leaving my native country at their age and then coming here and trying to learn a whole new type of curriculum tied then to a whole new language. Some teachers just don't understand the amount of labor or time that it may take. And so those that may have ESL experience, you're familiar with this. So BICS versus CALP, and BICS is that basic interpersonal communication skills. Basically meaning you can walk down the street and say hi and hold a casual conversation. The data says it takes approximately 6 to 24 months. So that's about 2 years for the general person to just be fluent and the ability to just have a casual conversation in their second language. Now leading into CALP, the ability to understand a second language at the academic level, they say it takes 4 to 7 years. So it's highly probable that you may have recruited a student in the freshman year and they're going to graduate from your high school not being perfect in English, and that's not a bad thing. But if your teachers don't understand that, they're going to be worried that they're going to graduate the student out of their, if you would, American history class not being perfect in English. So now that teacher then takes it personal that it may be a hindrance to the school's diploma or whatever it may be. Long story short, if the teachers are comfortable and they know that they've met the student at their level, they should see that the student's will get accepted in a university, and it's just going to take time for them to master the English language. And then lastly, those that are competent do adjust their classroom materials to bring in and incorporate other folks' culture. And what you'll find is the international students will bite, and then once they grab onto it, the American students will then be hungry to understand the pieces that the international students now have linked or connected to, and now the American students kind of feel left out. So I advocate for you to reflect on your classroom materials to see if you can add or incorporate some of your foreign students' background in there. So how do you get there? And so I argue some of you may be very comfortable working with foreign students, and I commend you for it. What I would like for you to consider, be an advocate for them, and if you sense you have team members that can be tough, here are some solutions to look into it and bring it to your academic team. And so the plan, you have to have a plan. It's literally, principals wouldn't put an iPad on people's desk and say, now you have to teach all iPad and good luck. You put professional development forward and really mend the approach to the bring your own device or using an iPad or Chromebook, whatever it may be. But people are provided the tools before you just jump in. And that's the same thing with the need for cultural competence. You have to become aware. I recommend that you consider doing or completing a cultural index to observe your own biases. That then will provide you some knowledge of where you are. You'll find some that the notion of sensitivity, some will have significant stereotypes. We see it throughout our own country and vice versa. It's not a bad thing. And then once you identified those, then you can start working up to that notion of being competent. I would like for you to self-reflect and be harsh on yourselves. And so as a faculty, sit back and say, what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong? And when you look at what you're doing wrong, you'll find that there may be just some small tweaks that really will get some buy-in from your other teachers, and then ultimately you'll connect your whole student body together. Probably the most difficult one is travel, because travel is based on resources, and I know teachers don't make a lot of money. So it's not easy to on your vacation or in summer to just get up and leave. And the more that you can travel, the more that you come out of your own comfort zone as an educator, and it allows you to really reflect on other cultures as a whole. And then you bring that back to your own experience and with your international students. And it takes time. This is something that's not going to happen overnight. And even if you have a plan in place now, please adhere to it and keep moving forward. And then as time moves on, and you'll see this today with Jim's his portion of the presentation. Now, it wasn't perfect on day one, nor was it, or is it still perfect? It's always evolving as a team puts a plan forward. I have included some certificates if you would like to consider. They have everything mapped out for you, starting from all the way from the west to the north to the east coasts. You see the universities there. I'd like to highlight Columbia's Global Competency Certificate because that is the only one that I've read so far where you do basically classwork. They're all online, but this one you do classwork, and then in the summer, per the teacher's schedule, for I think 3 to 4 weeks, you then travel to a foreign country, and with your instructors, you really get your hands dirty with the locals in that community. And I apologize, you're not headed to Rome, you're not headed to London or Paris, you're headed to some unique areas that I've never been that I think really bring you out of your comfort zone, but I think it'll pay off in the end. And so what can you do now? Advocate today for professional development, specifically for your content teachers, on seeing the importance of the language development process. Go back to your team and advocate for students' culture. You may have a diverse student body. Even if you have students from Mexico or Canada, consider understanding their culture a little bit more to bring all your students together. Consider removing the walls from your classroom Because once you do that, then now everybody's a student. And once you step out of the comfort zone of the classroom, you'll find that your American students will then rely on others to really let it be learning outside or learning in a different setting. But once you do that, you put everybody in a unique scenario. Offer multiple or variety forms of assessment. I like to share the story of an English teacher in New York teaching British literature, and she found that her Chinese students were not keeping up. And as her assessment, she gave them the possibility to act out the material as opposed to writing a long or lengthy paper. And what she found is she got more of a buy-in from all of her students, and then even her American students wanted to then act out their portion of their assessments. And she said she loved it, and the kids loved it, and now she's made it part of her her procedure. Reflect on your classroom environment. If it's something as simple as, I met with one science teacher, and all of her posters of scientists were men. And I said, this is, you're hitting every nail on the head, but could you consider, if I'm a young girl in your classroom, I observe that all scientists are men, basically. And it's something so minute as just having pictures or photos, but that really brings a sense of safety and welcoming environment to your room, and your students will sense that. And foster relationships. I always like to quote Dr. Rita Pearson, who says, "No child likes to learn from mean teachers." Basically, if you have that that sense of chip on your shoulder, and you're not willing to come down to their level, they could be the brightest students, but they're not going to participate in your classroom. So once you welcome their differences, you'll see that they'll embrace this part. And so I'd like to close with my last slide, as teachers are the keystone to international student programs. Going back to that slide where I posted all the terms, I always say that teachers are not only teachers, you're not only some parents, your coaches, your after school, your tutors, and now you're basically a counselor forging foreign cultures together to help make it work in your classroom. And so the keystone, if that keystone fails, that arch breaks. And if you think of the two arches as the foreign students and the American students, you hold it together. The teacher's ability to bridge the cultural gaps is what really makes international students programs succeed. And so now I'd like to introduce Jim White from Marquette Catholic here in Michigan City, Indiana. Jim's program, I think, has been going on now for about 6 years, and he's going to shed a little light on the sweat equity that he's really put into the program and his team that has put forward.
Okay, thanks, Nicholas. Hi, everybody. I'm the principal at Marquette, and like Nicholas said, we've been doing this for about, I think, 5 years maybe. And maybe it would be best this time if I start with a little background of the school so you get a flavor for who we are. We're in an urban environment, small city. You can see a picture of the campus here. We have several buildings. We have an academic building and an athletic building. We have 2 new dorms that we lease. We don't own them. And one is 30 boys and one is 12 girls probably right now. We also house international teachers and other guests that come and visit us. And about maybe 9 years ago, we were about 151 students. And we're about 310, somewhere around there right now. And so the global program for us, which I'll explain how it started, and I'll try and be as brief as I can in the 5 years work we've done. But the global program for us no longer became just a boarding program bringing international students in. It became something that was a catalyst to really change our entire image of the school, and now we're known globally as a global program. And we have programs that extend from boarding students, which we have about 50, including some host students, and we have study abroad opportunities. We have cultural immersion for a month. We have week-long festivals that we attend. We host camps, international camps, and so this has really become something for us. It's changed our curriculum. The programs have exceeded our expectations. The term global for us has really become something that we've embraced, not just in our international students that come, but we have a new project, Global Finance Lab, to trade on global markets. We have a Rosetta Stone Language Learning Lab, which tries to tie into that also. And we have several other global components that we've brought on. So just to say it in a nutshell, you know, we started, and I'll explain it, we started with just a few kids, and now we have an entire blown-out program in 5 years. And to give you an idea of financially what that's done for us, our school has a budget total, which is only $2.7 million. And the global program now is exceeding $2 million. So, you know, it's almost parallel to what we're doing in the school, as well as what we're doing in our global programs. And what started as what we call the boarding program has now become the Global International Studies program at our schools. So that's a little background on what's happened, and let me walk you through some of this. So, you know, as we developed our program, we developed a global studies team, and I'm going to tell you right now, in retrospect, you're going to invest in what you hope to get out, and if you're going into this just to gain some money based on some international students, you probably will not succeed. And as Nicholas was saying, it's all about developing a culture that's accepting to all of this, from your teachers to your parents to the students that you locally have. Everything is about selling what's the benefit to the students that are currently at your school. And as I said, the domino effect for us has been enormous. And in doing registration this past month for our incoming freshmen, which we've registered, you know, we expect about 90 students. All the parents I was working with were talking about the global opportunities here at our school. And so it's not only become just boarding, it's become really how we're selling our school right now. So it's expanding programs and everything else. All right, so we started, you know, about 5 years ago, and 2012, what have you, and we had 7 students, and we rented a beach house. We're right near Lake Michigan, just a couple blocks away, and we rented a beach house. We decided that through our host kids, that we just kind of had various host kids around, that they weren't getting the treatment they needed. We were going to take them under our wing, and we hired a teacher out of the blue who had no experience, and she ran this house. Actually, 2 of them ran this house on the beach, and we were very involved in it. The kids were great, and we learned a lot that year. In the meantime, we were looking to expand the program because financially we were in need, and so that's how we started it. And we eventually got our first dorm that we leased through a foundation, and that dorm housed, I think, about 15 kids, and the program took off from there. And as I said, now we have a couple of dorms that we lease, etc. And you can see each year, as we began to sell it to our teachers and our parents, the increase in international students began to exponentially expand. And you can see here now we're up to 49 students. And actually for 2017, we're at capacity and now looking for another facility for our students. Our leadership team is kind of unique, and there's no script, there's no book. I didn't start out with anything. My partner, Jenny Quinlan, who's near me, here we just started by experiential learning, I guess you would say, and we began to build this, and eventually we formed a not-for-profit company that was based on all of our profits going towards the school, and sustaining the school is basically what that was. And we set out to get that company to be separate from the school, because the business at hand became so vast. You cannot have your current employees, who are your secretaries or, you know, deans or counselors, be taking on this extra challenge. You've got to find people that are dedicated to what you're trying to achieve and have the time to dedicate to a program like this, because it takes an enormous amount of time. our agreement with the not-for-profit company, the Marquette Foreign Exchange Company, requires that me as the principal of the school also serve as the principal of the company. And so that became, that was easy at first, and now it's two huge full-time jobs that we have. That may have to change in the future. But our structure is such that I oversee things as the principal, and then Jenny is in charge of all of the enrollment of the program, and she does business with 3W and about 6 or 7 other companies. She also is involved in all of our cultural programs that deal with Guatemala, China, South Korea, Brazil, in those areas predominantly that 3W has been working with. And let me just say that it's important to find a company like 3W that the majority of your chips are in, and then diversify after that. So probably 85–90% of our students, in terms of international students, come from 3W, and then we partner with other various groups to begin to diversify the program in terms of Spain or France or Guatemala or what have you. And so that's Jenny's role in the program. And then as we developed year 3, when the money really started to come in and we had to do audits and all of these types of things, we hired a business manager for the company, who then got our books all aligned, and we provided a steady stream of income then to the school each year that we were in existence so far. And then that business manager took on the roles of beginning to form partnerships with cultural immersion and study abroad opportunities in some European countries. And so now we're expanding, and this is how the domino began. So almost 80% of our students by the time they graduate will have traveled abroad or studied abroad at some point, and almost 90% of my staff has already traveled abroad in some capacity. Last April, in one of our extended trips that we put together through our Global Studies program, we took about 90 students and about 8 or 9 teachers with us to Italy. And so that was really 1/3 of the student population and more than half of my teachers. So when we talk about developing the teachers and the students and the mindset, it's all about taking them there, not just going there yourself or having others involved. We've extended our programs to include each semester that we have teachers that come and visit us from China for a whole semester. They work with our students who are in the boarding program to give them private tutoring, and in exchange we send teachers to China. We have partnerships with France and Spain, where right now we just dismissed a French colleague that was with us for most of the semester, and we still have one from Spain that will be working with us, and they work in our foreign language classrooms as primary native language speakers. And I know I'm all over the board, but these are the kind of things that begin to expand as we really put the effort into not just looking at taking on international students, but developing a program with those students so that they can flourish too. And so Jenny's in charge of enrollment. We have the business office, and then what we've developed is we have an ENL teacher who next year will see every single international student we have, even if they're fluent in English, so that they have a direct advisor that will help them, and the teachers will have a direct connect when they have concerns about students. And our teacher, Christine, we brought her through training the first year, maybe 4 years ago, and she's been each year adding on to her ENL program. And next year she'll have full-time ENL, English as a new language, and also be servicing study programs and tutoring for all of those kids. So she'll really manage everything from scheduling right down to their actual class lessons, integrating them into other classes. A lot of schools will take 4 or 5 international kids and just mix them into the curriculum as if they were American kids. And that's quite challenging. As Nicholas was saying, they're so, the language barrier is so difficult to overcome, and they're very intelligent kids. And we sometimes think they're lazy or they're not putting in the effort. And really what we've learned is devote the first year to acclimation, orientation, language development, and then begin to integrate them into your classes, and you will find that they will excel beyond belief. We have, so we have 6 students graduating this year. Later on in the slides, I'll show you the schools that they've gone to, but it's really remarkable what happens when you can get some of the language, the orientation, and as Nicholas said, some of the cultural barriers broken. Not only for those kids acclimating to the program, but for those teachers that work with these students every single day. I have staff meetings where we talk about how to better service these students, how to break down the conception that they're not Catholic, so what are we doing with them? And that is a big concern to many. And actually, the way that I've flipped the side, and it's been quite effective, is that we look at this as a fertile ground for opportunity to evangelize kids. So when people say, you know, you're bringing in non-Catholics, or you're doing this, or you're doing, what you're really doing is bringing in kids who are hungry for knowledge, who have no understanding usually of theology, that then we're able to connect with if we begin with an introductory to Catholicism class rather than hammering them with some scripture or what have you. So we've learned that taking things slow, investing the time is well worth it, investing in your program financially, not looking at it as this cash cow, but investing in the kids as you go along, and you'll find after 5 years that it does become this enormous program that's generating enormous funds with enormous opportunities for international students as well as your local students. Let's see, I've got a slide in front of me here, and I kind of went over that, so I'll just go through this. I'm going to go right through that. These pictures here are pictures of the boarding program facilities that we have currently. Up on the upper left is our newest facility. It's a convent. It's about 2 or 3 buildings away from the main school campus. It houses about 30 kids, offices, a cafeteria, a lounge area, and in the basement areas for ping pong and things like that. Our houses are not run like dorms. We have people living there full time, and we have people that work during the days there, usually 1 employee on all of the time, sometimes 2 employees. They cook, they take care of the grounds, they do those kind of things. They tutor children, they have study tables, they do all of that just like they're their parents. These children can come and go. In back of the building on the bottom is the South Shore train line that'll take you to Chicago, and our students pretty much almost every weekend head to Chinatown or other areas in the city. They sign out, we have parent permission, and they go there. And so you know we've never had a problem with kids, knock on wood. They're very respectful. We have an understanding of communication and cell phone use and that kind of thing, so that we're always in touch with them. And they enjoy the freedom and the opportunity to explore on their own. Most of our kids are probably 17 years old or older. Many of them are 18 or older. And so these are our 3 buildings. The boys live in the one on the left right now. The one on the bottom is a coach house to a big facility that's in front of it that houses all girls. And a picture of the inside of where the girls eat is in the upper left. And as I said, we're at capacity now after 5 years, and we're kind of twiddling our thumbs, wondering what is going to be our next venture. And people say, well, are you ever going to stop, you know, bringing in the international kids? And probably, you know, until we run out of ideas and space and all these things, the answer would be absolutely no, because it's just changed everything about the school and about the way we treat children here and about the way our very diverse population in Michigan City has absorbed this. And so I would say no, we would continue to expand until we're absolutely at our limits in terms of resources, especially, not just facilities to board students. I want to just talk just a bit briefly about what's happened with our program. So we have the boarding program, and that was the initial program, and then global studies was the term that kind of sprung out of that. And eventually we developed a global studies diploma that students, international and or American stateside students, could apply for as a certificate on top of their diploma. It involves either hosting students or traveling abroad or studying abroad. And from there, then curriculum classes came into place. Things like this Global Finance Lab that we are going to launch next year came into place as a result of requirements for this Global Studies Diploma. It expanded to Valparaiso University, where our students will take dual credit classes and global study courses there. And so the domino in terms of curriculum is quite impressive. And, you know, when we place a little small school like this up against some of the bigger schools we have schools of 5,000 near us, they can't compete in terms of what we offer students and the opportunities that this program has allowed us to develop over time. My teachers, most of them at this point, are very fully culturally immersed in the programs and understand. We still have teachers that fight us on everything. As Nicholas was saying, you have the teacher that will say, well, this student can't speak English. What are they doing here? We're a college prep school. And, you know, you have to take the approach that if you're a Catholic school, you need to absorb these children. They're children. And you need to find a way to make them learn and be successful. The irony is, as I talk to my teachers, we do have some students that end up probably with very broken English after they leave. Now, if a student's with us for 4 years, they're going to be fluent when they leave. But I'm talking about a student that may be with us for only a year or 2 years. And your teachers will be amazed at the universities that they get into. As you can see, my 6 kids this year down at the bottom of the screen are at University of Illinois, you know, New York, Washington, etc. You can read the screen, and they're quite impressive universities, many of which my local students could never get into. We do place 100% of our kids into college acceptance, and our international program has not let us down one bit. These students are all over the board in terms of where they're applying, and they do have an advantage, and a lot of my teachers find that discomforting almost, that we have students that can barely speak English that are getting into UC Irvine, and we have American kids that aren't. And again, this is the type of thing that's going on not just in our high school, but at the collegiate level. They're looking for international kids. They're looking for the diversity and for the cultural programs that we also were looking for, and so they're very receptive to accepting these students. And you've got to get your teachers over the hump that, you know, you do the work in the classroom, you do the best you can, and the rest of it's going to be a lot of times up to an agent that may be representing some of these kids to get them into the next level. We have several students that do it on their own, of course, and we have others that have the means to afford agents and things like that. But when you think about, you know, are these kids going to bring down our theology? Are they going to bring down our curriculum? Are they going to bring down our graduation rates? The exact opposite has happened. And actually, we've evangelized more of our international students than we have our American kids, given the fact we're a Catholic school and have about 15 different feeders locally that feed into our school at this time. So again, I think the biggest thing I can tell all of you is, one, it takes an enormous amount of effort. You have to be willing to put into it, and the benefits will be beyond your wildest imagination. But I also would leave you with saying that I think the most important thing is to treat all children the same. When I work in the house on the weekends, several weekends in a row, and that's important to do, by the way, so you know all the children, and you'll find out that they're kids like any other kids. I play, you know, Xbox with them. I go and play football with them in the front. And although they may not be able to speak English all the time or be fluent in everything that we do, they're here to learn, and they're hungry for the knowledge, and we're here as educators to provide that. And as a principal, you know, it's been just an incredible journey. Nothing that you ever sit down and say, boy, I'm going to start this school that's got a global kind of flair to it. And it's just evolved into something so positive for us, for our employees, for our students, for our parents and our families, and it's really just been a great thing. And again, it's not just the global program, but all of those academic pieces. I know in an earlier presentation I was discussing just the volume of students it's allowed us to have, not because we have new international students alone, adding 40 or 50 kids to your enrollment, but the attraction for all of these other demographics in our areas that we've begun to expand into, because they see the school as being something unique and special. Our enrollment is peaked. I don't think we've been this high, and none of the people in this room's lifetime, and it's exciting stuff. And so, you know, I put my email up in an earlier. I hope that it will be up in this presentation, otherwise I can give it to you, but I would encourage you, if you have any questions, to do so. You know, one other thing that I talked about before that maybe I'll bring up is we do assess all of our students in the state of Indiana, and I know it's pretty much across the country, we use a test called the WIDA test, which is W-I-D-A, which any student who has a home where English is not the main language spoken would take this test. So not only our internationals, but any student that's here in that situation. And then we work with their language skills based on those results and build a program individually for each student, the same way we would build a program for any student in the school. And again, just treat all kids the same, and you'll find that the programs then begin to evolve. And what also evolves is what I call scaffolding, which are the supports for school. And I think it's important to not treat any of the kids differently, which is the first reaction that everybody does, and wants to treat them as if they're in another room. And I think if you just get over that first hump with your staff, great things will happen. And I appreciate the time to talk to everybody. And at this point, Nicholas and I will take any questions that we have.
All right, at this time we do not have any questions in the queue. However, I will leave it open for a few moments here. If anybody would like to submit a question, please click on the questions box in your webinar, GoToWebinar panel, type out your question, click send, and it will come to us. Also, if you look in the chat box right now, you will see Nicholas. He posted his email if you wish to contact him. And I believe they will also post Jim's email as well.
Jim, what's your email again?
You want me to punch that in?
Yeah, sure. Jim's going to type it in for you.
Maybe. There we go.
All right. It doesn't look like we're getting any questions in, so I guess we will conclude today's web. Oh, actually, I spoke too soon. As I was talking, someone wrote in a question here. What recommendations do you have for high school librarians to make international students feel more welcome?
Oh, that's actually a very...
Repeat the question again, can you?
Yes, I'm sorry. It says, what recommendations do you have for high school librarians to make international students feel more welcome?
Hey, that's a great, that actually is a great question that we've been kind of mulling over in terms of our English departments. And one of the things is to get books on tape that the kids have to read on class so that they can follow along not only with the reading part of it, but with the oral part of it. They're getting a double whammy there in learning. And so what I find is that it's not lessening the material by any means. The other thing we do is present the books in their language. So South Korean, I might find books that, and work with teachers to find books that are accessible so that the students can hear it in their home language. And a lot of times people think that that's dumbing down, but it's not. It's actually enriching and allowing them to participate in the activity, as Nicholas gave the example with the teacher from New York Institute assessment. So yeah, librarians can be a huge asset to this whole program, and the biggest thing is promoting it and allowing them to know that it's no different to read it in another language or listen to it in another language, that it's about the story and about the structure and those elements, not about what language it's written in.
We have another question that just came in. It says, Jim, have you found that the international program received more resistance from religious or lay teachers?
That's a good question. I'm going to tell you that I found resistance from everybody. And it's easier to work with the lay teachers once you can bring them aboard and travel with them and get them, and they work with these kids every day. The clergy or any of those are really not involved in the program, and so they see it from outside the fishbowl, and they wonder what the benefit is. And so you have to work with them. We have a brand new bishop here, and so we've been trying to nurture him after 5 years into what we're doing, and I know he must think we're nuts. But that's it. Educating people is really what you've got to do. But I think the clergy is probably outside the fishbowl. You got to work inside, which is your people.
And if I can add, because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here, I have the privilege of working with a wide variety of schools. And I have met some of the best sisters and the best priests that have really bought into the program as well. So it's really not a category. It's whatever that person's experience or prior experiences has been, and then it's if they feel comfortable with working with a student body.
All right, thank you. We do, okay, that seemed to be the two questions that we had there. So at this point, I would like to conclude today's webinar. Thank everybody for joining us this evening or afternoon, depending on where you are. Please remember to check nca.org for more listings on upcoming webinars and other professional development activities. And thank you again, both to Jim and Nicholas, for all of the good things that they have shared with us tonight. As a reminder, we will be sending this recorded webinar and presentation slides in another day or two by email. Thank you all again, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Thomas.